The Great Hall of Nexus Prime stretched for miles in every direction. 12 different alien species sat in their special chairs, each one designed for their unique bodies. The crystalline glowed with soft blue light. The insect-like collective members clicked and buzzed in perfect harmony. The massive warriors stood tall in their battle armor, even during this peaceful meeting. Council Speaker raised one of his 4 arms to call for silence. His silver skin reflected the lights from above as he looked down at the smaller beings below. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Hegemony Council had ruled this part of space. They kept order. They maintained peace. They decided which species could grow and which ones needed to be stopped. Today, they would decide the fate of humanity. "Fellow council members," said, his voice echoing through the hall, "we gather to discuss the human problem. These creatures have become too bold, too dangerous. They spread across star systems like a disease." The representative, a living crystal being named L, spoke next. His voice sounded like singing glass. "The humans refuse to follow our laws. They build colonies wherever they want. They make deals with inferior species without our permission. This cannot continue." Of the Empire slammed his armored fist on his chair's arm. The sound boomed through the hall. "These soft-skinned mammals think they can challenge us. Their ships are weak. Their weapons are primitive. Their soldiers die too easily. We should have crushed them years ago." The collective speaker was actually 5 beings who shared one mind. They spoke together in perfect unison, their voices overlapping. "The humans spread chaos wherever they go. They teach other species to question our authority. They give technology to races that should remain simple. They must be contained." Nodded slowly. He had expected this response. The Council's intelligence reports all said the same thing. Humanity had maybe 200 colonies scattered across their small section of space. Their largest fleet had only a few thousand ships. Most of their technology was at least 500 years behind Council standards. "Let me share what our spies have learned," said. A large screen appeared above the center of the hall. Images of human cities, ships, and soldiers filled the display. "Humans live short lives, barely 100 years. This makes them impatient and reckless. They fight among themselves constantly. They waste resources on meaningless conflicts." The screen showed human soldiers in basic armor, carrying simple projectile weapons. Their ships looked bulky and slow compared to the elegant council vessels. "Their technology is crude," continued. "They still use chemical rockets for some of their ships. Their weapons fire metal bullets instead of energy beams. They have not even mastered proper AI systems. Most importantly, they have no unity. Every human colony argues with the others. They cannot work together like civilized species." A representative, a being that looked like a walking tree, spoke in a deep, slow voice. "But our border scouts report something troubling. Humans have been contacting the and other lesser races. They offer protection and technology in exchange for friendship." Waved dismissively. "The inferior races always look for new masters when they grow tired of their current ones. This changes nothing. The humans cannot protect themselves, much less others." The collective spoke again. "Our analysis shows humans react poorly to pressure. When cornered, they become desperate and make poor choices. They will surrender quickly when faced with overwhelming force." Stood up, his massive frame casting a shadow over nearby representatives. "My fleets are ready. Give me permission and I will end this human problem in one swift campaign. We have 50,000 ships prepared for battle. They have maybe 5,000 combat vessels total. The war will last weeks, not months." Other council members began voicing their agreement. The math seemed simple. 12 advanced species with millions of years of combined knowledge and experience against one young race that had barely left their home system a few centuries ago. Looked around the hall. Every representative showed confidence. Their military advisors had run the calculations dozens of times. The outcome seemed certain. The humans have been warned multiple times, said. They were told to limit their expansion. They were ordered to stop interfering with our client species. They were commanded to submit their technology for council approval. Each time they refused. He paused, letting his words sink in. 3 months ago, human ambassadors stood in this very hall. They said they would never bow to our authority. They claimed their species valued freedom above safety. They said they would rather fight than submit. The representative made a sound like breaking glass, which was their version of laughter. Freedom is a luxury for species strong enough to protect it. Humans are not strong enough. Activated the hall's voting system. Each representative's chair glowed, waiting for their decision. All in favor of Containment Protocol Omega against the human species. The hall filled with light as every single chair glowed the same color. The vote was unanimous. The motion passes, announced. The human species will be completely eradicated. Their colonies will be destroyed. Their ships will be scrapped. Their technology will be studied and then eliminated. Any species that aided them will face appropriate punishment. Bowed his massive head. My fleets will begin the assault within the week. The humans will learn that defying the council has consequences. As the council members filed out of the hall, talking excitedly about the coming war, none of them noticed the small maintenance drone hovering near the ceiling. It looked exactly like the thousands of other drones that kept Nexus Prime running smoothly. But this drone was different. Hidden inside its basic frame was the most advanced recording equipment humanity had ever built. Every word spoken in the council hall had been captured and transmitted across space using quantum entanglement technology. The drone's makers had spent years getting it into position. They had studied council security systems, learned their protocols, and found their weaknesses. The council thought their meeting was private and secure. They were wrong. By the time returned to his private chambers, every human colony in space had already received a complete recording of the council session. They knew exactly what was coming. They knew they had maybe days before the attack began. And they were ready. The council had made their first mistake. They thought they understood humanity. They believed their intelligence reports. They trusted their analysis of human capabilities. Soon, they would learn just how wrong they were. Admiral Sarah stood in the command center of Luna Base, watching dozens of screens that showed every human colony across space. The recording from Nexus Prime had finished playing moments ago. Around her, military officers and civilian leaders waited for her response. Well, she said calmly, we all knew this day would come. Send the signal. Her communications officer, a young man named Tors, looked up from his console. Protocol Prometheus is active, Admiral. All colonies are responding. Across human space, a transformation began. The Council's spies had watched human colonies for years, seeing exactly what they expected to see. Mining stations that dug metals from asteroids, research outposts that studied nearby stars, trading posts where merchant ships stopped for supplies. Everything looked normal and peaceful. But appearances could be deceiving. On New Gettysburg, the outer colony that most expected to be hit first, workers suddenly stopped their normal duties. The mining equipment that had been digging for rare metals shifted and unfolded. Hidden panels opened to reveal massive energy cannons. The simple cargo containers stacked around the colony's edge opened like flowers, each one holding weapon systems that should not have existed. Captain Maria Santos, no relation to the president, commanded New Gettysburg's defenses. She watched her screens as council ships appeared at the edge of their system. 50 massive vessels, each one larger than anything humanity was supposed to possess. How many? She asked her sensor operator. 50 capital ships, Captain. Probably 20,000 crew members total. They're moving in standard council formation. Santos nodded. The council always fought the same way. They believed in overwhelming force applied in precise, predictable patterns. Their tactics had not changed in centuries because they had never needed to change them. "Time until they reach weapons range?" she asked. 4 hours at their current speed." Santos smiled. "More than enough time. Begin deployment of the welcome mat." Deep beneath New Gettysburg's surface, machines that had been waiting for 30 years came to life. Tunnels that had been disguised as mining shafts opened to reveal launch tubes. Hundreds of small, fast ships began emerging from underground bunkers. But these were not normal ships. They moved without any visible propulsion, seeming to slide through space like ghosts. Their hulls looked strange, almost liquid in the way they reflected light. Watched from his flagship as the human colony came into view, his tactical officer provided the expected report. Minimal defenses detected, some basic energy weapons, a few dozen small ships that appear to be civilian craft trying to escape, no significant military presence. Nodded with satisfaction. Begin the bombardment, destroy their orbital platforms first, then target the surface installations. Leave nothing standing. His ships opened fire with weapons that could crack planets. Beams of pure energy lanced across space toward the human colony. Every shot was perfectly aimed. Every blast should have been devastating. Instead, something impossible happened. The energy beams hit what looked like empty space and simply vanished. Not reflected or absorbed, they just disappeared as if they had never existed. "What happened?" demanded. "Where did our weapons fire go?" His tactical officer stared at his readings in confusion. I don't know, sir. The beams should have hit their targets, but the energy is just gone." That was when the counterattack began. The small human ships that had looked so harmless suddenly accelerated to impossible speeds. They moved through space in ways that violated everything the Council knew about physics. Some seemed to teleport short distances. Others phased through solid matter like it was not there. "Shields up," ordered. "Return fire." But the human ships were already among his fleet. They appeared inside his formation as if space itself had folded around them. Their weapons were nothing like what Council intelligence had reported. Instead of crude projectiles, they fired beams that seemed to eat through Council armor like it was paper. Even worse, the human ships learned. Once vessels adapted their shields to block one type of attack, the human weapons changed. They shifted frequency, altered their approach, found new weaknesses to exploit. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the human colony." "Put it through," growled. Captain Santos appeared on his main screen. She looked calm, almost bored. Behind her could see human technicians working at consoles that displayed technology he did not recognize. "Of the Empire," she said politely. "I am Captain Santos of New Gettysburg Colony. I wanted to personally thank you for volunteering to test our defensive systems. Your contribution to human military development is greatly appreciated." His massive hands clenched into fists. "You dare mock me, human. I will crush your pathetic settlement and every living thing on it." Santos smiled. "You're certainly welcome to try, but first, you might want to check your ship's internal sensors." His blood went cold. He turned to his tactical officer. "Run a full internal scan, now." The results appeared on screen moments later. Somehow, without anyone noticing, thousands of tiny devices had attached themselves to critical systems throughout his ship. They were not destroying anything yet, but they were clearly mapping every circuit, every pathway, every weakness. "What are those things?" demanded. "We call them learning bugs," Santos explained cheerfully. "They study everything about your technology so we can build better weapons to destroy it. Don't worry, they won't hurt you. Yet." Around the flagship, other Council ships were reporting similar problems. The strange devices were everywhere, and they could not be removed without shutting down critical systems. Santos continued talking. The Council made some mistakes in their intelligence about us. You thought we were primitive because we use different technology than you do. You thought we were weak because we fight differently than you do. Most importantly, you thought we were unprepared because we value peace. More human ships were appearing from nowhere. Not just the small, fast ones, but larger vessels that seemed to unfold from space itself. Their designs looked organic, almost alive. "Here's what your spies failed to understand," Santos said. "Humans have been preparing for this war since the day we met the first Council species. We knew you would eventually try to destroy us. So we built weapons designed specifically to kill Council ships. We developed tactics meant to counter Council strategies. We created technology that your best scientists cannot even detect." Watched in growing horror as his proud fleet began taking serious damage. Ships that had conquered dozens of worlds were being torn apart by opponents they could barely see or track. "But here's the most important thing your Council failed to learn about humanity," Santos said, her smile never wavering. "We don't just fight to win, we fight to learn. Every battle teaches us something new about our enemies. Every defeat shows us how to do better next time." The transmission ended, leaving staring at a blank screen as alarms blared throughout his ship. His mighty fleet, which had never known defeat, was being systematically destroyed by opponents who should not have been able to scratch their armor. In less than 6 hours, the Great would limp back to Council space with only half his ships intact. He would carry with him a message that would shake the very foundations of the galactic hegemony. The humans were not the primitive prey they appeared to be. They were predators who had been waiting patiently for their hunters to come close enough to strike. And now the real war was about to begin. Doctor walked through the research facility deep beneath Earth's surface. Around her, scientists from dozens of human colonies worked at stations that would have seemed like magic to most Council species. She stopped at a workstation where her assistant, Doctor, was studying captured Council technology. "What did we learn from Fleet?" asked. Pulled up holographic displays showing the internal structure of ships. "Their armor is impressive, but it has one major weakness. It's designed to handle energy weapons that attack from outside. It can't deal with attacks that start from inside the ship itself." Nodded, she had expected this. The Council species had become too comfortable with their technological superiority. They had stopped innovating, stopped adapting, stopped growing. For them, warfare had become predictable and boring. Humans were different. Humans had spent their entire existence fighting for survival. They fought wild animals, natural disasters, diseases, and most importantly, each other. Every generation of humans faced new challenges that required new solutions. "Show me the analysis," said. The display shifted to show one of the beautiful crystal ships used by Their vessels looked more like living art than weapons of war. They moved through space by creating harmonic vibrations that pushed against reality itself. "Fascinating technology," said. "They use crystalline matrices that resonate at specific frequencies. The entire ship is basically one giant musical instrument that can manipulate space-time." Smiled, and like any musical instrument, it can be made to play the wrong notes. "Have you finished the resonance bombs?" "Yes, ma'am. We tested them on captured tech last week. One small device can shatter an entire crystal matrix by introducing chaotic frequencies. Their ships will literally tear themselves apart from the inside." On the other side of the galaxy, the fleet was learning about human creativity the hard way. Admiral L watched in disbelief as his beautiful ships began cracking along their crystal seams. The harmonies that held them together were being disrupted by weapons that attacked the very foundation of their technology. "How are they doing this?" he asked his science officer. "Unknown, sir. The humans seem to have found a way to introduce discord into our harmonic fields. It's like they're forcing our ships to sing themselves to death." Meanwhile, the collective faced an even more disturbing problem. Their greatest strength had always been their shared consciousness. Millions of individual beings connected by mental links, able to coordinate perfectly and share knowledge instantly. But humans had found a way to turn that strength into a weakness. Commander Tor's former communications officer now led a special unit called the Mind War Division. His job was to develop weapons that attacked consciousness itself. The collective's mental network is like a computer system, he explained to his team, and like any computer system, it can be hacked. His scientists had created something they called mimetic viruses, ideas designed to spread confusion and doubt through the collective's shared mind. These were not physical weapons, but concepts that attacked the very foundations of how the collective thought. When the first mimetic virus was deployed, the results were immediate and devastating. Collective ships began moving erratically as their crews experienced conflicting thoughts and emotions. Some vessels started attacking their own allies as confusion spread through the mental network. The collective had never experienced individual doubt, personal fear, or private thoughts. Now they were being flooded with all three at once. But it was the Empire that faced the most terrifying human innovation of all. Stood in the Council's emergency session, his armor still bearing scars from his defeat at New Gettysburg. He struggled to find words to describe what he had witnessed. "They don't fight like any species we have ever encountered," he told the assembled representatives. "Our soldiers are trained to fight in formation, to follow orders, to maintain discipline. Human soldiers fight like wild animals." What could not explain was that humans had never stopped being persistent predators. On ancient Earth, human ancestors had hunted prey not by being faster or stronger, but by never giving up. They would chase animals for days, tracking them relentlessly until their prey collapsed from exhaustion. Now they applied the same strategy to warfare. Human ships that were damaged did not retreat for repairs. Instead, they adapted, using whatever weapons they had left in new and unpredictable ways. Human soldiers who were cornered did not surrender. They found ways to turn their desperate situation into an advantage. At the Battle of Station, Commander demonstrated the full horror of human determination. His small fleet was surrounded by 10 times as many Council ships. Any reasonable commander would have surrendered. Instead, ordered his ships to ram the enemy vessels while simultaneously detonating their power cores. The resulting explosions created artificial black holes that consumed not just his own fleet, but the entire Council armada. The Council commanders watching from nearby systems could not understand such tactics. Why would anyone destroy their own forces just to win a battle? They did not understand that for humans, there were things more important than individual survival. Humans would die to protect their families, their homes, their freedom, and their future. They saw death in battle not as a failure but as a tool to be used when necessary. Received reports of these battles in her underground facility. Each engagement taught them something new about their enemies. The Council species had become predictable over thousands of years of easy victories. They followed the same patterns, used the same strategies, made the same assumptions. "They think like politicians," she told her research team. "Everything they do is about maintaining order and control. They can't understand chaos, so they can't fight against it effectively." Her scientists had been working on something special, adaptive weapons that learned from each battle and shared their knowledge with other human forces. When a Council ship found a way to defend against one type of human attack, every other human ship instantly learned about that defense and began developing counters to it. It was like fighting an enemy that became stronger every time you hit them. The most terrifying human innovation, though, was not technological. It was strategic. Humans had spent decades studying not just Council military capabilities, but Council politics, Council psychology, and Council society. They knew which species hated each other, which ones were oppressed, which ones were planning rebellions. Now they began sharing that information with the galaxy's lesser races. Species that had been enslaved by the Council for suddenly learned that their masters were not as strong as they appeared. They discovered that the Council's unity was built on fear, not loyalty. Across Council space, rebellions began breaking out. Not random uprisings, but coordinated revolts armed with human weapons and guided by human intelligence. The Council found themselves fighting a war on dozens of fronts against enemies they had never considered threats. Their attention was divided, their resources stretched thin, their confidence shattered. In the depths of space, Admiral smiled as she read the latest battle reports. The Council had declared war on humanity, expecting an easy victory. Instead, they had awakened something that would not stop until every tyrant in the galaxy was either dead or powerless. The war was just beginning. Council speaker stared at the reports covering his desk, each one bringing worse news than the last. What had started as a simple extermination campaign had become a nightmare that threatened to destroy everything the Council had built. The fleet had lost half its ships to weapons that turned their own technology against them. The collective was fragmenting as their shared mind filled with confusion and doubt. 3 entire fleets had been destroyed by human forces that seemed to appear from nowhere and vanish just as quickly. But the worst news was not military. Across Council space, the lesser species were rising in rebellion. They had declared independence and were fighting Council forces with weapons that looked suspiciously human in design. They had captured their entire sector's command center. Even the peaceful had joined the revolt, something that should have been impossible. Activated his private communication system and called for an emergency meeting. Within hours, the surviving Council representatives gathered in the Great Hall of Nexus Prime. The mood was very different from their last meeting. "How did this happen?" demanded. "Our intelligence said the humans were primitive. Our military advisors promised easy victory. Our scientists confirmed that human technology was centuries behind our own." Still recovering from his wounds, spoke first. His voice was quieter than usual, lacking its normal confidence. "Our intelligence was wrong about everything. The humans were never primitive. They were hiding their true capabilities and waiting for us to attack." The representative, his crystal body showing stress fractures from recent battles, added his own concerns. "Their weapons are designed specifically to counter our strengths. They have studied us for years, learning our weaknesses while we remained ignorant of theirs." The collective speakers looked lost and confused, their usual perfect unity replaced by visible discord. "The humans use psychological warfare against us. They attack our minds with ideas we cannot defend against. Our mental networks are compromised." Felt a cold fear growing in his chest. "What are you saying? That we are losing this war?" Before anyone could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the hall. The security chief appeared on the main screen, his face pale with terror. "Council Speaker," the security chief said, "we have a problem. Long-range sensors are detecting human ships approaching our system." "How many ships?" asked. We're not sure, sir. They appear and disappear from our sensors, but we estimate at least 10,000 vessels." The council representatives looked at each other in shock. 10,000 ships was larger than any fleet the humans were supposed to possess. How had they built so many vessels without anyone knowing? "Activate all defenses," ordered. "Contact every available fleet. We will protect the capital with everything we have." As council forces scrambled to defend their home system, a message appeared on every communication device across the galaxy. President Maria Santos of Earth sat in a simple chair, looking directly into the camera. Her expression was calm but determined. "People of the galaxy," she began, 3 months ago, the Galactic Hegemony Council voted to exterminate the entire human race. They decided we were too dangerous to live because we refused to submit to their authority. The message was being broadcast on every frequency, in every language, to every inhabited world in known space. The Council believes they rule this galaxy by right of strength, Santos continued. They think superior technology gives them the power to decide who lives and who dies. They have maintained their empire by crushing anyone who dares to question their authority. Watched the broadcast with growing horror. The human president was revealing Council secrets that should have been impossible for her to know. But the Council's strength is built on a lie, Santos said. They rule through fear, not because they are truly superior. For thousands of years, they have oppressed countless species, stolen resources from weaker worlds, and destroyed civilizations that refused to obey. Images began appearing on screen: secret Council documents, recordings of private meetings, evidence of atrocities committed by Council forces. Information that should have been protected by the most advanced security systems in the galaxy. "How does she have these files?" whispered his intelligence chief, a nervous being from a species that looked like a walking fish, stammered a response. We don't know, sir. Our systems show no signs of intrusion, but somehow they have accessed our most classified information." Santos continued her broadcast. "The Council declared this war to preserve their power. We will fight this war to end their tyranny forever. Every species that has suffered under Council rule, every world that has been enslaved or exploited, every civilization that has been freedom, this war is for you." That was when the real attack began, not just against Council military forces, but against the very foundation of their civilization. Across Council space, computer systems began failing. Not random crashes, but targeted attacks that revealed every secret the Council had tried to hide. Tax records showing how much wealth had been stolen from subject species. Military reports detailing genocides that had been covered up. Communications between Council members discussing how to maintain control through fear and violence. But the humans did not stop at revealing information. They began sharing it with every oppressed species in the galaxy, along with detailed instructions on how to build weapons, organize resistance movements, and coordinate with other rebel groups. The who had been treated as slaves for centuries suddenly found themselves armed with weapons that could destroy Council ships. The whose home world had been strip-mined for resources received technology that could liberate their enslaved population. Dozens of other species that had never been considered threats suddenly became dangerous enemies. The Council's member species began turning on each other as long-hidden conflicts came to light. They discovered that they had been secretly undermining their military campaigns. The collective learned that other species had been planning to attack their mental networks for decades. But it was the human cyber warfare campaign that proved most devastating. Council computers across the galaxy began displaying the same message. Freedom is not a gift from the strong to the weak. Freedom is the right of every thinking being to choose their own path. The message was signed with a simple phrase: "With sympathy for those who suffer, and no mercy for those who cause suffering humanity." Realized with growing horror that the humans had been planning this campaign for decades. Every Council system they had infiltrated, every piece of intelligence they had gathered, every alliance they had built with lesser species. It had all been preparation for this moment. The war was no longer about exterminating humanity. It had become about the survival of the Council itself. In his private chambers, composed what he knew might be his final message to the human leadership. He offered negotiations, peace talks, anything to stop the systematic destruction of everything he had spent his life building. The human response came within hours. It was brief and devastating. "You declared a war of extinction," Admiral replied. "We accept those terms. The only question now is whose extinction this war will bring." Stared at the message as explosions began lighting up the sky outside his window. The greatest empire in galactic history was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The humans had taught the galaxy a lesson that would never be forgotten. Predators should be very careful about what prey they choose to hunt. Sometimes the prey bites back. Admiral Sarah stood on the bridge of her flagship as it orbited the ruins of Nexus Prime. The once mighty capital of the Galactic Hegemony Council was now a broken world, not destroyed by human weapons, but abandoned by its own people as the Council's empire collapsed from within. The war had lasted 2 years, not because the humans could not win faster, but because they had chosen to be precise in their victory. Each Council species faced a different fate, carefully tailored to their crimes and their willingness to change. Admiral, her communications officer, reported, "We're receiving the final transmission from Council Speaker." Nodded, she had been expecting this. Put it through. The main screen flickered to life, showing the former Council Speaker in what appeared to be a small escape pod drifting through empty space. His silver skin looked dull and tired. Behind him, the lights of his ship systems were failing one by one. Admiral said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I suppose you have won your war." Shook her head. "This was never our war. You declared war on us, remember? We just finished what you started." Was silent for a long moment. "I have been thinking about our first meeting, years before this conflict began. Your ambassador told us that humans valued freedom above safety. We thought that made you weak." "It makes us dangerous," replied, "to anyone who tries to take that freedom away." "Yes," agreed. "We learned that lesson too late. Tell me, what will you do now? Will you build your own empire? Will you rule the galaxy as we did?" Smiled sadly. "That's where you still don't understand us. We never wanted to rule anyone. We just wanted to be left alone to live our lives in peace." The communication ended as the escape pod lost power. The last Council Speaker would drift in the darkness until his life support failed. It was not a death that enjoyed, but it was the end that had chosen for himself when he voted to exterminate humanity. Around the galaxy, the other Council species faced their own reckonings. The Empire had been the most violent and aggressive of the Council members. They had committed genocide against dozens of species and enslaved entire sectors of space. When their military was finally broken, the species they had oppressed took their revenge. Human forces did not participate in the destruction of the. They simply stepped aside and allowed the former victims to decide their fate. The whose children had been taken as slaves chose extinction. The whose had been strip-mined chose extinction. Every species that had wronged made the same choice. The proud empire ended not with a grand battle, but with their final survivors being hunted down by the very beings they had once considered inferior. They faced a different kind of extinction. Their crystal ships and harmonic technology had made them beautiful and powerful, but also dependent on resources that were rare and difficult to replace. With their fleet shattered and their supply lines cut, they could no longer maintain their civilization. Some chose to join human colonies, learning to live in ways that did not require their ancient crystal technology. Others retreated to remote worlds where they tried to rebuild their society on a smaller scale. A few found new purposes working with other species to develop technologies that helped rather than harmed. The Crystal Empire was dead, but the people lived on in new forms. The collective faced perhaps the strangest transformation of all. The mimetic viruses that humans had introduced into their shared consciousness had not been designed to destroy them. Instead, they had been carefully crafted to give collective members something they had never experienced before: individual thoughts and personal identity. For the first time in millions of years, beings who had shared a single mind began to think for themselves. Some found the experience terrifying and tried to reconnect with the old hive mind. Others embraced their newfound individuality with joy. The great collective fragmented into thousands of smaller groups. Some remained partially linked, sharing thoughts by choice rather than compulsion. Others became completely individual, exploring what it meant to be alone in one's own mind. As the various council species met their different fates, something new was being born in the galaxy. The oppressed races that had lived under council rule were finally free to choose their own paths. President Santos stood before a gathering unlike any that had ever existed. Representatives from hundreds of species filled a great hall on a neutral world, not to serve a master species, but to talk as equals about their shared future. The Galactic Hegemony Council believed that order required oppression, Santos told the assembly. They thought that peace could only exist if someone was strong enough to force it. They were wrong. The human president looked around the hall, seeing beings that had been considered primitive or inferior by their former masters. Now they were proving that freedom allowed civilizations to grow in ways that slavery never could. Humanity offers a different vision for this galaxy, Santos continued. We propose a confederation of free worlds, where each species chooses its own path and no one has the right to force their will on others. The response was not immediate acceptance. Many species had lived under council rule for so long that they struggled to imagine governing themselves. Others worried about conflicts between different civilizations without a strong authority to maintain order. But humans had an answer for these concerns as well. They offered to serve not as rulers, but as guardians. Human fleets would protect smaller species from aggressive neighbors. Human technology would be shared freely with any civilization that requested it. Human advisors would help new governments learn to function without oppression. Most importantly, humans promised to leave. Once a species was stable and confident in its independence, human forces would withdraw and allow them to truly govern themselves. The new Galactic Confederation was born not from conquest, but from choice. Hundreds of species joined not because they were forced to, but because they wanted the protection and friendship that humanity offered. Dr. now elderly but still brilliant, established research centers throughout the galaxy. But instead of developing weapons, these facilities focused on medicine, agriculture, and technology that improved life for all species. The same human creativity that had destroyed the Council now worked to heal the damage that thousands of years of oppression had caused. Years passed. The galaxy changed. Species that had been enemies under Council rule became allies and friends. Technologies that had been restricted to the powerful were shared with anyone who could benefit from them. New civilizations emerged and grew strong without fear of being crushed by their neighbors. And throughout it all, humans kept their promise. As each species became capable of protecting itself and governing wisely, human forces to allow them complete independence. The galaxy learned the most important lesson about humanity. They were dangerous only to those who threatened others' freedom. To those who chose peace and cooperation, humans were the most loyal and helpful friends imaginable. The Council had tried to create order through fear and oppression. Humans created peace through freedom and friendship. In the end, the galaxy discovered that the best way to maintain civilization was not to force order on others, but to help everyone become strong enough to choose order for themselves. The Council's extinction had sparked something far greater than any empire, a galaxy where every being could choose their own destiny.